that. We're in, and we're the franchisor in that. Freddie's, we're the franchisee. Um, but probably the most exciting one that I'm involved in right now, well, two. One, prescription benefit manager. We've started our own prescription benefit management company, and which means that the government set this up years ago to buy. That this group came to him and said, if you buy bulk amounts of drugs from the drug companies, we'll be able to distribute them to hospitals cheaper. What the government, in their ultimate failure of wisdom, didn't do is set up some kind of parameters for profitability, and those have been abused.
It's really been exploited, I think.
Oh, it's terrible. An $80 drug is selling for 2,000, and people might have heard about insulin a year ago was getting outrageous. It was all because of PBMs, prescription benefit managers. So we're into that. That's pretty exciting. I think that's going to really amount to something. But probably the most exciting is that 5 years ago or so, 4 years ago, a gentleman by the name of Sid Gutierrez was a captain of a shuttle flight, and then later on became a commander in charge of the flight, and went to space twice. Contacted me through a banker who I'd used funding these hospitals was major investment, meaning in well over $100 million in real estate, equipment, whatever. So I met lots of bankers, and one of them said, you got a great idea, Sid, but you don't have any assets that you can pledge of substance. We can't give you $2 million. And so, but he said, I know this guy that's funded a lot of things from scratch, and I'll introduce you. So the banker actually flew here with him, and we sat down for the day. Thankfully, I have a chemistry degree, because when Sid explained the science to me, I can honestly say I didn't do the math. I don't really absolutely understand it, but I understood enough of the chemistry to know that you could make fuel out of plastic, and because plastic is made out of oil. So if you excite the oil, meaning you create a catalyst, the gases that are in oil to begin with, as simple as gasoline or methane, propane, butane, pentane, all of those things are extremely flammable, and they're still in the plastic. So that's why when you take your shoestring that's unraveling, you light it on fire, it burns, because there's oil in there. And I could understand that. I said, okay, I'm willing to take a chance. I've got 10 investors that have been investors with me in probably 15 different projects. I went to each of them and I said, give me X amount of money and don't expect to ever see it back. I said, this is wild.
That's shooting so straight, I love that. When you have that relationship with a person, you can go to them and you can say that, and they believe you're telling the truth. Yeah, they could they could lose it, or it could be a win, but they know exactly where they stand. There's no fluff.
None. And I wouldn't want to do it any other way, because that's how you make enemies.
Right.
And as I said earlier, you live off your history. Well, I lived off my history a little bit there, in that I'd made them a lot of money, and they were willing to take a chance on my thought process. And we did. We spent $2 million, and we actually built an engine and launched it. And it was the engine itself. The launch wasn't necessarily a success, but the engine itself was a success. We used what's called a sounding rocket, which is someone else's rocket, and we put our engine in it. And our engine was so successful that it went right through the rocket. The motor mounts couldn't hold it, and because it's a bottle rocket, when it ignites, once it totally ignites, if you blink, it's gone. We're going Mach 3, Mach 4, Mach 5 in seconds, not minutes. And so we launched it. The engine was a success. We launched again. year and a half later with, so that rocket was, I'll say 10 inches, 12 inches in diameter and 15 foot tall. And a couple of years later, we launched a second one, which was, I don't remember, 25, 30 foot tall, foot and a half in diameter, much bigger engine, meant to go. You can't, by FAA rules, we couldn't launch into space. We had to launch suborbital. And so we couldn't go over, I believe it was 25,000 feet. So we launched, that one was an absolute success, went out of sight. We took that and started building what we call our Dauntless rocket, which is a orbital rocket that will go into low or near Earth orbit, will carry more or less a 2,500 pound payload, and more or less meaning that depending on where you want to be in orbit, it could take less load, uses more fuel, or more load, less fuel, that sort of thing. We are to the point now where the first engine we tested was a 5,000 pound thrust, which was huge and semi-crude. But we now have 12 patents or patent pending, and we're testing a 22,000 pound engine, which is what will go. There'll be 6 of those on our Dauntless launch in probably 2026 when we'll launch, and one on the second stage, and we'll take several satellites into orbit. What makes us unique is every other rocket is a biofuel. It's either solid or liquid, and either one of those cannot be throttled, shut off, or restarted. The solid absolutely can't. The liquid, to some degree, can. And that's how SpaceX is able to launch and sometimes recover some of their devices. But ours is able to be throttled, be directed, to be shut off in flight, and then reignited in flight. And so we are on the verge of being able to do what's considered in-space propulsion, meaning satellites right now are, the military is very worried about our enemies being able to destroy satellites in space. They need a methodology of moving satellites around from being destroyed by enemies or meteorites or other space junk. And so we're in the process of designing one that is only about 4 foot tall. It'll basically be a space tug. And we'll take 20, 30 of them up, put them into orbit, leave them dormant. And when one is needed, we can fire it up, run it over to whatever satellite it needs moved, and push it out of danger, and then put it back into orbit. This is a very wide statement, but satellites in general have about a 5-year span because their orbit is deteriorating from the day they go up. And we can go, and so at the end of 5 years, effectively, you either want them out of there or you want them put back into the orbit that they need to be in. And so we can take a 5-year-old satellite, hook onto it, and either increase its decline so that it ends up going into atmosphere and disintegrating, or we can push it back up into the orbit that it needs. And that's a huge difference between us and SpaceX. SpaceX takes up 20, 30, 40, 50 satellites at a time. All of them have to be dumped out at the same place because once they get into orbit, they shut off and that's it. And satellites, all of them are unique. And if you use the concept of a camera, and at 300 miles up, a camera from its lens will take 20% of the Earth, let's say. If you bring it down 100 miles, it only captures 10% of the Earth.
Right.
Every time it rotates. And so that's why if you don't have the ability to put it into exact orbit, all of a sudden you've got to put up more satellites to cover the spaces and or the gaps. And so we're able to we think an application will be that we'll go up into space. We'll have these setting up there, and will be used as a tug. That's one that we're working on. Another one is we've already built an engine for what's called the Hellfire missile. We've had the casing, we've built the engine, we've tested it at 25 times. Actually, I shouldn't say test, we've demonstrated it now 25 times. We can build it for an incredibly low price, and as compared to what they're doing now. I'm only talking about the engine because we're not
the ammunition on it,
not the ammunition, not the guidance, not any of that, just the engine. The engine, so it's really important that you be able to fit an engine into a missile for these reasons, an existing missile. Every airplane has a method of hooking up. If you change that, then you've got to change the airplane and everything else. Every palletization system that is used in warehousing or in an ammunition dump has a design and requires that everything stay the same. So we were challenged with building an engine that could fit in there, that could double the range of the Hellfire missile, and we believe we have accomplished that. So we're in negotiations with a lot of different people to build a variety of missile engines, and we're involved with several states now in negotiating where we're going to manufacture them. That's been my job, which has been fantastic. I've never been able to really work with governments and in the kind of scale and size of what I'm talking about here, because we'll have several thousands of employees, and it's just another education in the process of life of learning how to do that, and what is interesting and what isn't, and what we need and what we don't, and it's kind of it's been it's just a continuation though. It's like you said. I went to him. I said, "You're going to lose your money. You could lose your money, or it could be a major success." I go to the States and meet with governors now and attorney generals and everybody else, which kind of shocks me that I'm able to get speakers of the House, governors, all of their staff into a room for 2 or 3 hours at one time and not be interrupted. And I never really thought about being in that position. But they're an interesting group, and you know what? They want honesty too. So I tell them, I said, you can give me all the tax incentives you want. I don't care. What I need is a building and an education system that can give me scientists, because we're going to employ a lot of scientists. We already have 60 scientists working for us.
And these are high-end jobs you're hiring.
High-end jobs. There won't be a job under $100,000. And so we're telling the states, okay, we're going to be doing this. I think we're going to be making missile engines before we get Dauntless launched into satellites. And so, but wherever we start making the missile engines, these are all 3D printed. It's all high tech. We have an injection nozzle that is patented. The fuel cell is patented. The exhaust nozzle is patented. We built a new turbine that is going to get a patent that is incredibly unique. It'll be on every automobile in 20 years or less. We have it's a whole variety of patents. That the injection nozzle is something that can go on every engine in cars today and provide 100% combustion of all fuel.
Wow.
One thing that that most or a lot of entrepreneurs, at least that I know, they're like in their business, kind of working on it, and they're kind of like when you first started, probably on that building and rehab that building. You were probably 100% involved in that project, and so, but then at some point you transitioned, where it didn't all rely on you, obviously, because there's too many things you got going on now to be all on you. What would you link the ability to be able to go from I'm